once that happens, no reset is possible.
Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today is January 8th, 2021, and this interview was recorded on Friday. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Rafi Farber again. You can find him on Seeking Alpha under AustroLib, like Austrian School of Economics, AustroLib. He also has his own newsletter, which I highly recommend. It's called the Endgame Investor. I've spoken to Rafi a couple of times in the last few months, and today we're gonna look at hyperinflation and why Rafi thinks we are on the path to hyperinflation, and what also I'd like to cover what Rothbard said about hyperinflation, because Rafi covered that in one of his reports this week, and I found it really interesting. I have read Rothbard, a few of his books. I haven't read the book which Rafi mentioned. We also going to talk just about things in general, what Rafi sees in the world of economics, finance, currencies, maybe geopolitical as well, and even cover what happened today to the price of the paper price of gold and silver. We saw a few hours ago, in a matter of 1 minute, gold dropped from 1905 to like 1775. Silver dropped from above 27 to as low as just under 26. So Rafi, thank you for talking with me again. I think my viewers really enjoy your opinion and your views. So welcome.
Good. It's great to be back with you. I enjoy talking with you also.
Great. So can we then get onto hyperinflation, because there's a lot of misconception out there, not just about inflation. Some people think inflation is the CPI, and they also miss what hyperinflation is, that it's not a linear event. It's something that happens really without people really expecting it to happen. It's out of the blue, right?
Yeah, well, once people expect hyperinflation to happen, it's already happened. Because if you're expecting money to fall to zero, you'll get rid of it as fast as you can, and that's what causes prices to go to infinity in paper terms. That people don't want to hold money. You can give a lot of definitions for hyperinflation, but one that I wouldn't say I made it up, but it seems constant to me, and it can be defined, because you can't really define hyperinflation in terms of, let's say, prices rise 100% in a week or 200% in a week. This is all a posteriori, definitions that are not, they can't be constant. They're just, throw a dart in the wall and pick a number. But if you want a constant definition for hyperinflation, that is when the desire to hold money as money instead of goods and services, the desire to hold cash balances falls to zero. Because once nobody wants to hold any cash for any amount of time, prices go to infinity. What gives money value is the desire to hold it and not to spend it, to use it for later. But if no one's going to use any of it for later because they just want to get rid of it, that's when the money is no longer money. It doesn't work at all. So that's a constant definition of hyperinflation.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that people think about hyperinflation is that it can only happen when the economy is growing really fast, when the monetary policy is very loose. But it's actually in the past, it's happened in economies that have been heavily indebted, like France in the 1790s with the assignats, like Germany after World War I, Austria, and the central countries of Europe. They were all, their economies were on the floor. They had a lot of debt, war reparations, political unrest as well, which I think we are right now witnessing. I mean, just look at what happened a couple of days ago, right? So, yeah, it's not because of costs going up or what Jim Sinclair says is cost push inflation, but a loss of confidence as well in the state, I would say, because a currency is something issued by the state. So if you lose faith and confidence in the state and the monetary authorities, I think we are further and further along that road to hyperinflation. Could you talk about the idea that hyperinflation is like the last defense against government confiscation of wealth in the way Rothbard talked about it?
Yeah. So just to preface, people think that inflation can only happen in a growing economy. So we can challenge that entire notion of what economic growth even is, because technically, if you economic growth, I mean, the Keynesian mainstream definition of what economic growth is GDP expansion, but that's it's tautological, meaning it's an identity. It doesn't add any information, because the amount of GDP is the amount of money that exchanges for goods and services in an economy. So obviously, the more money you have in an economy, the more exchanges in monetary terms there will be for the goods and services. So really, like, growing GDP doesn't really say anything much other than how many monetary units you have in an economy. But if you if you take hyperinflation, GDP, and you keep counting the amount of transactions at higher and higher prices, obviously GDP is going to explode to like incredible heights. And yeah, so technically speaking, hyperinflation happens with an extremely crazy growing economy. What does that growth mean? It's meaningless. This is why the Austrian school rejects all these economic measurements in monetary terms and this like empirical voodoo sort of measuring everything. Remind me later, I wanted to get into a cultural point about this economic measurement and how it relates to the coronavirus. But so yeah, this whole notion of economic growth doesn't make any sense. So the Austrian school brings economics down to the individual level of, how do you know you have a growing economy? Standards of living rise. People are happier. They have more stuff. It's not the amount of money that's circulating. It's the amount of real wealth that people have. Are they living in houses or huts? Are they, do they have dishwashers, or are they, washing by a river? I mean, these are the things that you measure that make your life better. Like if GDP goes up 10, 20, 30%, and, you're living in a shack and you barely have any food, like who cares about what GDP is? This is all irrelevant. So what you're asking about Rothbard is that Rothbard explains the uneven progression. I was just looking at it just to review. I think it's on like page 1053 or 1054 of Man, Economy, and State. And this is Rothbard's magnum opus on the way an economy works. It's taken off of it's more like an easier reading of Mises's Human Action. Because Rothbard was a native English speaker, Mises wasn't, so he was a much clearer writer, better sentence structure, just easier to understand. So he describes hyperinflation as the inevitable process of any inflation in the world. It starts with the government printing money and then forcing people to use it. But at the beginning of that process, what happens is that you see price increases, but that's countered by production increases sometimes, and sometimes prices even fall in an inflationary environment. So people still hold on to the money, and prices do not go up evenly. But at some point, people start to see that prices keep going up and up and up, and then they realize that they got to get rid of this money as fast as possible. And that's when it doesn't really matter how much money, even if the government stops printing money entirely, the money could already be dead by then, because once that psychological recognition hits that it's not goods and services that are going up but money going down, then everyone attacks it at the same time. But this actually stops the inflationary gains that the government makes, because if they can print money and then buy whatever they want, or whatever votes they want, whatever pressure groups they want to satisfy, whatever wars they want to start, this is all real resources. So the more they inflate, the less people who have fixed salaries, the less they have, the more the people close to the monetary spigot get, and they keep getting robbed. So at some point the only way to stop this is to attack the money. And yeah, it's like a self-destruct button, on the Enterprise. I mean, use a Star Trek analogy. Rather than let them get the ship, just blow it up. So they can't rob you anymore. I mean, like, if you're going to take it from the perspective of, let's say, like a credit card thief, like someone who steals credit card numbers on the internet has, like, let's say 1,000 credit card numbers that he hacked into. I mean, what's he going to do? Is he going to, like, make $1,000 charges on all those credit cards? No, that's not going to work, because the credit card company is going to stop it, or someone's going to look at their statement, challenge the charge. What he's going to do is he's going to make small charges, let's say $10 a month or $10 every 3 months on each credit card, and sneak it in there so nobody notices. And that's how inflation works. But but then he gets greedier. He wants more and more stuff. He'll make bigger charges. Eventually, they'll shut off the credit cards, and that's what inflation is. It's people sticking something into your body, sucking your blood, and eventually you just pull it out and disconnect yourself from the system. And it's very hard, but that's the last resort. And once that happens, no reset is possible. They can't do it. People talk about the IMF with SDR, or what is it called, drawing rights, or digital currencies for central banks. That's not going to work either, because there's no qualitative difference between a paper dollar and a digital dollar from the Fed that works on a blockchain. It's all the same stuff. It has to be a commodity-based money, so there has to be a return to gold and silver. Now there's a discussion on whether Bitcoin can satisfy that. I don't think so. It just seems crazy to me. Bitcoin is going up now because there has to be like somewhere for all this inflation to go, and part of it is going into Bitcoin. But no one's buying Bitcoin so they can pay their grocery bill. No one's buying it to use it as money. They're buying it to accumulate more dollars so they can use those dollars as money. But once people want to get out of it, it's going to fall back down to, I don't know. These bubbles are not something that I can get involved in. If you want to, buy 1% stake in Bitcoin, thinking that you can earn some fiat for a while, it might work. You might get a lot, but if you put any significant amount of money in it, it's very, very dangerous. The money is going to return to gold and silver, not to Bitcoin. Bitcoin might survive, but only as a means to get money, gold and silver, not dollars.
Yeah, and I think the environment we're in is not an environment where you have to, or you can be greedy, I would say. And I think there's a lot of greed and euphoria in Bitcoin. And when the currency collapses through hyperinflation, when there's a revulsion to this process of confiscation that you talked about, which I think is actually subconscious, because people are not going to wake up one day and say, "Wow, we want hyperinflation. The government is stealing from us." It's just going to come through, like I said, subconsciously, and they're going to realize this money is worthless. I don't want it anymore, and they're going to want something. And the problem with that I have with Bitcoin as well is that it doesn't have a track record of thousands of years. So we haven't seen how it reacts to a currency collapse before. And I think, that's the problem. I've told my viewers, if they want to have Bitcoin, yes, have a little bit, but not, don't bet your house on it. Don't also take on more debt to buy Bitcoin or anything, or even gold. I don't recommend people take on debt. Yes, the debt will be extinguished when there is a hyperinflation, but you can bet that when they have to reorganize the system, that the bankers will make sure that you still have that debt. The price of gold today, for example, we saw a few hours ago how it collapsed like in a minute, from like 1905 to like 1875. I think it dropped $30 in a minute. I think personally, with interest rates starting to rise here, and you've spoken about that, all the treasuries they have to issue this year, especially in the longer end, they want to manage the public's perception. And I think that's the kind of action you get, trying to get people to get out of gold, and also to keep the gold price low, so it doesn't give people a barometer. It doesn't tell people, oh, look, the government and the banks inflating. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I saw the action in gold this morning. Yeah, it was. I looked at the charts. It was about 7,000 contracts dumped in 1 minute, from 3 a.m. to 3:01 a.m. Like 6,927, something like that. But this has been happening, all week since the Monday breakout. What you've seen is weak gold prices, weak action in the gold markets, but pretty strong action in the gold mining stocks relatively. Some like, for example, Newmont, I think yesterday, the biggest gold miner in the world, Newmont, had its best daily action since April. I think yesterday, or maybe 2 days ago. But it was
2 days ago, yeah.
2 days ago, a huge move up. And this, I checked the European stocks in London, and that's where you are. It seems that the GDX and the GDXJ, those ETFs, are performing pretty well. For a 1.3% move down in gold in 1 minute. So the mining stocks aren't really buying this. So the other thing I noticed was that other commodities are not being affected. Energy is untouched. Copper, I think, is up today. Palladium and platinum, which generally magnify the moves in gold usually. So if gold is down 1.3%, platinum is usually down 3 or 4%. Palladium even more. But that's not happening. Agriculture is still strong today. This was a focused attack on the gold and silver markets. So the question is, like, why should that be? Why would bullion banks do this? And because they're the ones that sell the contracts short usually. So why would they do this? And what you have to understand is that this is a refrain that I have, that the only reason that the dollar can buy anything right now is that it's really an intermediary for gold. That's what gives gold its value from a logical necessity perspective. I mean, you can't start a fiat system based on nothing. All fiat systems that are started today are based on the dollar, and the dollar only has purchasing power because it was once based on gold. This goes back to Mises' regression theorem, the logical regression of money. And the only reason that Bitcoin has any market value, that you can buy things with Bitcoin, you can only do it indirectly by exchanging them for dollars, which were once exchangeable for gold. It all goes back to that. So I think Peter Schiff was talking about this on his podcast yesterday, saying that that central banks really they love the fact that Bitcoin is going crazy. I think it might be that, I didn't check the whole numbers, but it might be that the combined market cap for all cryptocurrencies on CoinMarketCap, I think, is close to $1 trillion now. So I mean, that's not absorbing all the inflation. There's more than that. They printed more money than that since March, but that's a good percentage of money locked up in cryptocurrencies that isn't going anywhere. So it's like a vent for these consumer prices to be delayed from rising as fast, because most of this money is going into cryptocurrencies. But since the dollar is based on gold and not on Bitcoin, a rising gold would really make central banks nervous. So they don't mind cryptocurrencies going up, but they would mind. It would make them very nervous for gold and silver to go up substantially. And that will happen. We're waiting for it. I think Axios reported that that Joe Biden, his immediate plans for spending in the first 100 days or something is I think a $4 trillion infrastructure plan plus $2,000 checks for everybody. Like, what do the numbers even mean anymore? Just keep going. I mean, this can't survive much longer. And I don't know how long it is, but you just need to wait and not be too greedy and make sure you have enough income. Because once your income in whatever fiat money is going down, if you have your savings in gold and gold equities, then if hyperinflation is not going to hit you directly, you'll be okay.
Yeah, and I saw yesterday as well on Zero Hedge, they published a research a piece by Goldman Sachs, the Borg, as you call them, saying that they expect 750 billion of new stimulus in next month already. If Biden, when Biden is inaugurated, that's what we expect to happen. And now that the Congress is controlled by the Democrats as well. So yeah, it's like confetti. So how are you going to rate the Dow versus confetti? It's going to go to infinity, just like the stock market in Venezuela did really well. And you were speaking about earlier how the Keynesians, to them, everything is like the measurements, their artificial measurements to say how the economy is doing well. And it seems to be happening now as well with the stock market at all-time highs, while the economy all around Western Europe and the US is in really uncertain times with all these lockdowns and the crisis. And we haven't even seen the impact of what these lockdowns will have on small and medium-sized companies. I think there will be a lot of bankruptcies. I think there'll be a lot of people also losing their homes. So it's totally artificial. And it is frustrating for us who know what's going on about the money and gold. Well, but I think the most important thing is to be patient, because I twigged onto it in 2002, so I'm waiting for 18 years.
So about frustration, there's a core of frustration that to this whole thing that goes way beyond one attack on the gold market that brings it down 1.3% in a day. That's frustrating in like a minor way, and it's not going to last, but really, what's more deeply frustrating in terms of like it hurts my soul, I guess I could say, is that let's imagine like somebody from just a stam. Sorry, stam is a Hebrew word, like a general person from let's say an American, a rugged American from like 1920s, 1930s, and he's used to like making his own living and working hard and this and that, and he sees. And sometimes people get sick and they get the flu. And he sees everybody like walking around with a mask, not going to work, shutting down schools. And you ask him, well, let's say he asks, well, how many people have been killed by this thing? Well, a few 100,000, about the same as, a bad flu season. He's like, so you're shutting down the world for like, how would he really respond to this? It goes back to the numbers and the Keynesian obsession with statistics. And this is where I wanted to get into a cultural point. That there's a commandment in Judaism that Jews are not allowed to count people with numbers. Like when we get together for a prayer group, there's got to be 10 people. So instead of saying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we use a verse from the Bible with different words. So you're not allowed to count Jews. So how this relates is that it's not just a religious thing. It's assigning a number to a person is deeply offensive, and it hurts. When we have ID numbers in the government, when FDR introduced the social security numbers for everyone, and now we have these we're assigned numbers. I mean, that's less egregious than, let's say, tattooing a number on someone's arm. but we went through that too. But this whole Corona thing, it's an obsession with numbers, and every day you hear how many more infections, how many more hospitalizations, how many more deaths, and we just want to numbers. It just never stops, and then that instills fear in people, and that's what, and then you have to start arguing with them, like, of course we have to shut down the world, they say, and then like, but it goes down to, like, that's the real frustration. You're trying to convince people that they should keep living, and that you can't print trillions of dollars and have it make you rich. And you have to, like, convince people of these basic realities, like going back to the story of the Garden of Eden. Like, yeah, it's not going to be Eden anymore. You have to actually work for your food now, and it's going to be hard. You have to actually do things. And our response is, okay, let's stop doing anything and print money. And we laugh at was it Ponce de Leon or was it Columbus? One of them was this myth that he was looking for the fountain of youth. And we're like, oh, that's so funny. There is no fountain of youth. There is no tree of life. And now we're all chasing it all at the same time, simultaneously. And then people like you and me are trying to tell people, like, this isn't going to work, folks. You can't shut down the world and print money and make everybody rich. This doesn't make any sense at all. But just trying to argue that central point, it's like banging your head against the wall. You can't convince anyone to be sane in the most basic sense anymore.
Yeah, and even before they shut down the world in 2020, we were going the same path, and it's really hard to convince people that money is not really wealth. It's just like a means, of exchange. It's also like a way to store some of your excess wealth, but you have to produce it. But a piece of paper or a debt instrument is not wealth. And about the numbers that you're talking about, we get you go on Daily Mail online, which is a big newspaper here in the UK, and I think Americans look at dailymail.com as well. And every day it's like the chart of all the cases. But I tweeted a few weeks ago, because I looked it up. With Google, you can look these things up. There's 383,000 new babies born every day. And I know we shouldn't put numbers on people, but why don't we focus on that? Why don't we have headlines every day? Oh, today it was 385,000. So that's improved. Oh, tomorrow, today it was 400,000. So we're getting more and more, human beings being born. Like you said, yeah, they're just scaring people, focusing on these numbers. They don't talk about the 1.3 million people that die every day of, car crashes, or the millions of people that get lifetime injuries from these car crashes as well. So yeah, I think it's
Mario, that billions of people are exposed to car crashes every day on the roads. They just don't show any symptoms.
Yeah, and the other thing as well, I think billions of people get the normal flu every year. There's, I think, 1 or 2 billion cases of the flu every year. But right now, flu cases have actually disappeared. We don't have the flu anymore. I guess that's one of the advantages of this. I guess it's because they're counting it as the new repackaged flu, right?
Yeah. A little more on the numbers. If you go back to the Soviet Union, right? They were huge, and they would have these like 5-year plans to grow a certain amount of potatoes. Or if you ever read Frank Decoter's book on Mao's Great Famine, that was the biggest Holocaust in human history, far worse than the Nazi Holocaust against the Jews, even worse than Stalin's Holocaust against the Ukrainians, which was the second worst. But Mao's was the worst, and what he was obsessed with was reaching a number. He had some kind of stupid idea in his head that he was going to export a certain amount of steel. So then he would draft the entire country. Chinese were very, very obedient, even if they were all starving to death. That everyone was now drafted into the steel industry, and then they would all produce steel, so they could export it, and Mao could reach his number, right? So he could have that statistic. forget about anyone who was killed in the process. And now that everyone's like trying to make steel to meet his quotas, no one's growing any rice and no one's growing any food, and they all starve to death. And this is not that hard to figure out. And it's not like this is anything new. All these central plans. I mean, you could see this whole coronavirus thing as a giant central plan to stop the numbers instead of making them bigger, making them smaller with lockdowns. But it's just the mirror image of the same thing. So to return to another cultural point, that this is one of the first stories in the Bible, is the Tower of Babel, right? The verse in the Pentateuch that opens with that story is, and in the land they were only talking about one thing, and matters were like very monolithic. It's very machadim, one like unitary, single goals. Like it was the first central plan in the world. I don't care if it happened historically or not, but clearly the author of this story was telling you that central plans run by a central government with one idea to build a giant tower is going to kill everybody, because who's going to grow food? Who's going to build houses? Who's going to do that? This has been happening since the dawn of humanity, and we're just in another version of it right now. We think we're so smart. We're doing the same stuff, except instead of building things, we're shutting everything down and building the money supply, which is worse.
And the central plan now that I think they're looking towards is this green economy. The idea that we can all focus on cleaning the planet and keeping it clean. So what happens to humans? How do we produce and grow food and eat and survive? It seems to be like the modern version of the Tower.
Well, in terms of environmental destruction, I mean that is happening. I mean it is worrying, but it's not a central plan for a green economy that's going to solve anything. It's going to make it a lot worse. But what will at least bring us more into balance with this planet is rising interest rates and getting money back into balance. A little bit of inflation, or a lot of inflation, price inflation, meaning when the cost of living really goes up seriously, and all this money that's being trapped in Bitcoin and financial assets and all these things that are stuck in bank balance sheets, when that goes out into real assets, then people are going to have to consume less stuff and waste less stuff and conserve resources more. And a sound money is really the ultimate solution for the environmental problems we're having, because inflationary fake money, what it does is borrow from the future, because you pay people in debt and they give you real resources, and then you just consume more and consume more, but eventually the resources from the future run out and you have to stop doing that. So when this inflationary system falls, we're going to have to consume less, and unfortunately the poorest classes in society, in global society, the impoverished people in these third world countries, a lot of them are going to die, and there's nothing we can do about it. But everyone's standard of living is going to fall, except even those that have some real money, their standards of living are going to fall, but not as much. The solution to these environmental problems is to bring humanity back in balance with real goods and services and resources that are on this planet. And the way to do that is to bring interest rates back into a supply and demand equilibrium.
I agree, because I've spoken about that before. Because if you look at the monetary system and you go back to the late 60s, early 70s, when the whole thing imploded, Nixon had to close the gold window in 71. And I remember growing up in Brazil, I was about 4 or 5 in 1970. So just around that time, Brazil won the World Cup in Mexico. And there was a little song, 90 million people in action, and let's go Brazil, 90 million. And there was 90 million people in Brazil, and now there's over 200 million. And you look at all the other developing countries, and even the US, the population has grown so much ever since 1971. And I think it's part of this, what you said, money became not an object. People could borrow a lot more and consume the future. That's what the Austrians call credit. You consume something that you're going to produce in the future. And we've consumed too much. And I agree with you. When this system implodes, the current monetary system, it will be, the natural way to rebalance things. People like Klaus Schwab and Greta Thunberg, who think we can do that through going carbon or carbon zero. They need to look at the monetary system. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that.
It really hurts me to talk about Greta Thunberg. I mean, she's just an innocent child. She's being used as a pawn.
Well, she's turned 18 now, so she's an adult.
Well, she's I really have a hard time criticizing her, even though I understand she's dangerous, but that's what happens. They get them while they're young. They put them in these centrally planned curricula, public schools, and education is it's so dumbed down, and it's just a shame. But at that, I might have talked about this before, but I have this very distinct memory as a kid, just wondering how inflation is even possible. Because if prices keep going up and they never go down, that's not a natural pattern. The world doesn't work that way. The world moves in cycles. It's a negative feedback loop. Things go up, they go down. They go up, they go down, and things are supposed to stay in balance in a natural feedback loop system. But if you have a system where things only go up, eventually they explode, no matter what that system is. You cannot have a sustainable positive feedback loop in anything in nature. So when I remember as a kid thinking about that, and then something inside me was saying, like, this doesn't seem right. But then I just shut it off because everyone just said that's how things work. But I always had that in the back of my head, but it only exploded back into my consciousness when I discovered Ron Paul in the Austrian school, and I'm like, wow, that's exactly what I was thinking of as a kid before everybody stuffed me with all this propaganda. But yeah, this is hyperinflation is just a natural consequence of any positive feedback loop finally exploding.
Yeah, the crack up boom that Mises talks about. And I remember as well always being interested in inflation, because in Brazil we had a little inflation even when I was a kid. And no one seemed to understand why it was happening. But I also discovered Ron Paul and the Austrian school back in around 2000, 2001. And it's really helped me understand what inflation really is. And like you said, everything is a cycle. Things, we can't, if we stay up and don't go to sleep for 5 days, we're going to have trouble. We're going to really collapse and then maybe even die, or we have to rest for a long time. And that's why we go to bed every night and wake up in the morning. And they've done it on a huge scale with the monetary system. Could we go over backwardation, going from a social part now back to the markets? Explain to viewers, because it's a concept that even professionals in the market don't talk too much about. Backwardation, contango, and why do you think backwardation right now could be pointing to the end game in the fiat dollar?
Yeah, well, backwardation is when the cost of something now, cost of a commodity now is more expensive than the cost of it in the future, and that is not. It's not a natural. It's not a natural state of things, because if you want to lock in the price for something in the future, like you want to say, I want to pay you $1,200 so let's say $12 for this amount of bushels of wheat in a year. That means the guy who says okay is only going to get $1,200 in a year, but he in the meanwhile he has to pay for storage, he has to pay for insurance, he has to, and he's already locked in the price. So the farther out you go in the future, the higher the price should be to compensate for all these carrying costs, however it costs to store the wheat. So when there's a shortage, when the wheat hasn't been picked yet, then yeah, wheat now tends to be more expensive than wheat later. But that's only because there isn't enough to go around. So you need it faster because the wheat needs to be consumed. And then you'll get a discount. You'll get a discount for future wheat because because other people want it now, and there's going to be a bigger supply in the future because you're going to pick the wheat that you're growing. So it tends to be around shortage times when wheat in the present is more expensive than wheat in the future. So but that's a cycle. Wheat goes in and out of backwardation naturally as the harvest changes. But it's the same with every agricultural commodity. But if you go through, agricultural commodities, they're harvested at different seasons, so they don't all go back into backwardation at the same time. They go into backwardation to balance each other, just like a negative feedback loop in everything we've been discussing. And certainly, if backwardation is happening as it is now in pretty much all agricultural commodities, not all of them, but most of them, and now it's starting in natural gas, and it's happening in lumber and sugar, a few others, but all at the same time now. But how is that possible if all these harvests are coming in at different seasons? The answer from a logical standpoint has to be, what do all these commodities have in common? They have in common that they're traded in dollars on the COMEX, because the dollar is the world reserve currency, so almost all commodities are traded on the paper exchanges in dollars. So if backwardation is happening in all commodities, regardless of whether there's physical shortages or not, what's really happening is that something is happening in the dollar. Meaning, why would wheat in the present be more expensive than wheat in the future? Because people want to get rid of dollars sooner rather than later, because they see the price of the dollar in terms of what it can buy falling. So I have never seen backwardation in so many commodities at the same time, and I do not think that it is unrelated to the money supply hyperinflating, which it is. The checking accounts are going vertical. M2 is going vertical, not in consumer prices yet, because a lot of it's being trapped in stocks in Bitcoin. But it'll come. So the last commodities to be in backwardation should be gold and silver. They're not in backwardation yet, but once they are in backwardation, that would mean that gold and silver being in silver maybe, but gold being in backwardation doesn't make any sense in terms of a shortage, because there can never be a shortage of gold, because gold is never consumed. You can't, not that you can't consume it, you can, but nobody does. And maybe in tiny amounts, in like dental fillings or something. But even gold and jewelry is not consumed, because it can be melted down for monetary purposes very easily. It's not consumed, so there's no shortage. So a gold backwardation would strictly mean that the dollar is trying to be, that people are trying to escape dollars for specifically gold, which is another monetary asset. So gold has been in backwardation for maybe a few days at a time, but never on a sustained basis. So that would be the red alert for this is about to come to an end, like in a matter of weeks. That if we see sustained gold backwardation, that spot gold becomes more expensive than future gold, then batten down the hatches, get your guns, store your food, and move to a rural area and get out of the way.
Let's look at what you said earlier about the Keynesian mentality of measuring things. And I think that has grown since 1971 when the system, was taken off gold. Everything is about measuring debt and GDP. Do you think it will be the nail in the coffin, final nail in the coffin, hopefully, for the Keynesian philosophy once this system implodes, once interest rates have to rise, like you said, to balance the world? Do you think that will be the last of the Keynesians for us, hopefully?
That's really hard to say. What I can tell you is that this is a very mentally stressful time for everybody in this world. I have 5 kids at home. The schools are shut down. And I'm trying to keep my family, mentally fit, able to deal with this. And thank God we're in a good situation relatively. Everything's okay with us. But I have a lot of friends in much more weaker and vulnerable positions who they came into this already weakened, and families are being ripped apart. And some of my friends who were mentally unstable before this have attempted suicide. This is horrible mental stress for everybody. And I can put on like a nice demeanor, and at the core, I'm okay. But it's hard day in, day out. So I can't tell you if this is going to be the last of the Keynesians, but I can tell you I personally cannot continue mentally if I don't have the positive outlook that at the end of this, liberty is going to win. Because I have no other choice but to accept that, because I believe in a God, and I believe that human history has a direction. And every lockdown, we're on lockdown again. And I have to think that every lockdown, what they're doing is they are killing the goose that lays their golden egg, or their fiat egg, or whatever they want to call it. The more they shut down production, the faster it will all come to an end, and we can be freed from all this tyranny. So is this going to be the end of the Keynesians? Unless you believe that the world is going to be redeemed, which, some kind of eschatological messianic vision that you have. And, we all have that in one way or another, depending on whatever our religion might be, or lack of it, whatever you might want to think or hope for. Yeah, I do believe in that. But when the American Revolution happened and Britain was kicked out, started with the Articles of Confederation, then government got a little bigger with the Constitution, and then, eventually, skipping a few hundred years, the Keynesians came in, which was kind of like Soviet light. And then they grew, and the cancer is now taking over. But yeah, when it collapses, hopefully it'll shrink back down. Will it completely be erased, and we'll be in some kind of balanced, the best situation that humanity could possibly be in? I hope so. But we have to keep together.
That's right. And I'm sorry to hear about. I guess you're in Israel. Just for the viewers who don't know, Rafi's from Miami originally, but he's lived in Israel for years. So he's in lockdown there as well. His kids can't go to school. I'm fortunate as well that I started doing my videos on YouTube about 5 years ago. It's picked up over the years, so it's not affecting me as much. I have one daughter. She's in her early 20s, and she's with us, and we're lucky. But she was supposed to be moving to Wales with her boyfriend, and she can't. So they're putting everyone's lives on hold, and I think that's horrible what they're doing. I think they're trying to push us into doing things that we don't want to do, which I won't talk about, but most of you probably know what it is. So yeah, I really, when I make my videos, I seem cheerful as well. And I am cheerful because I have, like you said, I've got hope that things, sanity will come back, because that's the way things always work. People who are in charge now, they always try, to control things. It never succeeds. As you said, I think in your newsletter a few days ago, the only way empires go is, the way of fiat currency, to zero. Empires, they rise and fall, and hopefully that will happen as well. Anything else you'd like to say, Rafi, maybe about your newsletter, where people can see what you write? You write articles for free as well, and I don't think your newsletter is unreasonably priced either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for those interested, you can find my newsletter by Googling "The End Game Investor." It'll be the first link. It's through Seeking Alpha. It's a daily commentary, Monday through Thursday, Sunday through Thursday. Sunday I do a weekend report that's more elaborated. I think it's about $200 a year, $220, something like that. And you can find me on Seeking Alpha under Austrolib, where I do write an article once every week or two. And look, it's a community of like-minded people where we can support each other mentally also, as well as financially, with ideas of like-minded individuals. You can have a 2-week free trial. You don't have to pay. You can look at my model portfolio, and I give trading advice. I have a core position in precious metals. It's mostly a precious metals portfolio with a few others, some energy stocks. So my trading strategy is I have a core position and I trade on top of that based on technicals. I try to keep. My goal is to keep my subscribers under emotional balance. Like I took a small position in the portfolio, for example, in a gold fund when I saw the breakout on Monday. But I said, look, there could be attacks, there could be this, that. You need to make it small, so that if the timing is wrong by a week or 2 or 3, then you don't freak out and lose money. So you can keep the fear at bay, and also you want to keep also the positive emotions at bay. If I take a huge position in a leverage fund or some crazy move like that that's irresponsible, and then I look like a genius, then you get arrogant, just like the Keynesians are, and you think you can do anything, and then you do stupid things. So you don't want to be too happy. You don't want to be too despairing. You want to be balanced, just like every negative feedback loop and every cycle that we've been discussing in this interview. I try to keep the human mind, not too greedy and not too scared, just right. That's the strategy.
Great. Rafi, I hope things get better for all of us in terms of what's happening, since last year. And I thank you for sharing your time with us, and wish you all the best. And hopefully we'll also talk again soon.
Yes, it's a pleasure talking with you, Mario.
Thank you.